Before I jump into the presentation, I want to acknowledge that while we are over the curve of the pandemic, we're still not through the woods. Our struggle is still very real, and even though we've learned lessons, we still have lessons to learn. With that, let's get started. Hi, I'm Dr. Lindsay Vance, and I'm the Senior Director for Instructional Design here at San Diego State University Global Campus. Global Campus is the continuing education and online college here on the campus, and we primarily work on credit and non-credit programs that run all across California, the country, and the world. I got my start in instructional design teaching composition and creative writing. And what really inspired me about instructional design was the ability to solve instructional problems and to expand our impact beyond the traditional classroom. I have a passion for empowering educators to be their best, and I feel like instructional design is such a great field to do this. I lead a team of 4 senior instructional designers, 1 instructional design technology specialist, and 3 fantastic student assistants who help us with quality assurance and academic media production. Although the pandemic was challenging, I'm incredibly proud to say that we achieved a lot during the last 2 years. Our team collectively supported over 100 courses to be developed since fall 2020. We helped migrate over 150 courses from Blackboard to Canvas in the course of 1 year. And we helped our programs team launch more than 8 new degree completion programs, 6 master programs, and redesigned 3 existing programs. Here at Global Campus, our vision of instructional design really centers around 3 pillars: connections and community, purpose and inspiration, and high expectations and support. For connections and community, we emphasize designing courses with a high degree of instructor presence, which includes things like creating a welcome video, explicitly stating the instructor's role in the course to support student success, and frequent announcements. We also emphasize student-to-student discussion and collaboration, as well as student-to-instructor feedback. And finally, we also design frequent instructor feedback opportunities in the course, not just on graded work, but on discussions, projects, activities, things like that. For purpose and inspiration, we ensure that the courses are relevant to students while addressing program and course learning outcomes. We emphasize using authentic assessments that connect to the community or mirror the work of professionals. And we make sure to highlight the passion and accomplishments of our instructors. They do a lot of research in the field, they are engaged in their discipline, and they can bring that directly to the students. Finally, for high expectations and support, we ensure that our courses match the rigor and academic expectations of our main campus courses. We design courses that are clear and logical, as well as accessible and inclusive. And that includes working with students who have different abilities, from different backgrounds, and different life experiences. Like many colleges and universities, we had a number of priorities to manage during the pandemic. First and foremost, the university focused on making this environment healthy and safe for all learners. But we also needed to address systemic racism and hate, as well as trauma within our community. For instructional design, we were charged with ushering instructors through the rapid remote transition, changing LMSs from Blackboard to Canvas, as well as adopting Zoom as our web conferencing tool. We held a number of workshops, roundtables, and conferences with faculty, and we had to develop some longer-term strategies to sustain this new environment. We also saw the growth of online and high-flex courses, as well as designing equitable and more inclusive content for our students. And finally, there was a huge concern around academic integrity in the online environment. As individual team members, we had to persist throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, and that meant balancing professional and personal priorities. Our team was dealing with things like mental health and burnout, ever-changing COVID protocols, blending work and home life into the same space, as well as losing staff and resources throughout our college. All of this was happening while there were emerging technology trends and new tools that we needed to learn. And this is all while supporting, guiding, and encouraging students, faculty, and colleagues. It was a lot to take on. As educator and author Michelle Borba writes, as anxiety goes up, empathy goes down. And as a team, we were noticing this in our working relationship with faculty and colleagues. So, despite all of the anxiety in our organization, in our team, we needed to have the ability to reconnect with empathy, to recenter people in instructional design. And as Tracy and Hutchinson write in their study of empathetic design, quote, instructional designers engage in imagining the cognitive and emotional learner experience of the instructional experience and how the learner may respond while engaging in that experience. So it was really important in our work over the last 2 years to find a way of coming back to those interpersonal interactions that increase empathy, commitment, motivation, and the ability for us all to succeed in the online environment. This brings me back to my central question. How can we center people in instructional design? And in reflecting on our successes and trials of the last 2 years, I couldn't help but think about 4 pillars that help move our work forward. First was building collegial support networks. Second was clarifying roles and responsibilities. Third was increasing stakeholder engagement and collaboration. And fourth was seeing and serving each individual. If the pandemic has taught us anything, it's that we're stronger together. To build our collegial networks during the pandemic, we did a number of things. First, we made sure to facilitate connections between faculty members, staff, and across these different groups. Since instructional design touches on all operational and academic areas at SDSU, we could see who would be great working together, where we could forge partnerships, and where we could leverage relationships to benefit our programs and courses. This resulted in the cross-pollination of practices and faculty motivating and inspiring one another. Once we made dynamic connections, we really focused on what we had in common. What were our common pain points, goals, interests? We were able to share resources and information that not just benefited our college or our department, but others as well. With our special insight into the operations and academics across campus, we were also able to recognize who was not being included in critical conversations. The voices of students, faculty, or staff that were missing, where we could extend an invitation or create greater awareness. Next, we were certain to take the opportunities to recognize and celebrate the success of the faculty we were working with. San Diego State regularly updates the entire campus on grant awards, recognition for faculty and staff, and those are great opportunities to follow up with people and reconnect. And then finally, one of our most successful strategies was to create rituals and regular meetings throughout the year. Across the California State Universities, we have a monthly common interest group meeting across the instructional design teams. And that's a great way to get together and share best practices and network. Many of us go through the same training courses and workshops, and that's a great place to start collaborating. And my team has weekly virtual roundtables every Friday to focus on team building and connecting. And we regularly invite guests from within and outside of the campus to keep our creativity and inspiration going. And in the coming year, I'm really looking for more opportunities to network and get together with people, both within our campus and outside of it. Instructional design is often the face of an institution. Instructors may spend more time with us than their program managers, their department heads, their chairs. We often are the front line for questions, concerns, and feedback from instructors. However, not every question or concern that we get is our responsibility to resolve. And although instructional designers tend to be problem solvers, we need to rely on our colleagues to do what they do best so that we can do what we do best. The first step in defining responsibilities is to use what's called the RACI model to understand who's responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed for any task or project. Those who are responsible will complete a task or check it off their to-do list. Those who are accountable are the people who will sign off on the work completed. And really, this is going to be one person per task or project. Those who are consulted offer their insight and expertise, but they might not necessarily be the people completing the task. And then those who are informed are getting regular updates, status reports, and information from the project team. Once we know who's responsible for a task, it's important to delegate. Like I said, although instructional design wants to jump in and solve problems, we want to make sure that our faculty are feeling supported every step of the way. So we rely on what's called a warm handoff. If an instructor emails me or asks a question about something like payroll, I will make a warm introduction. I'll write an email to our payroll specialist. I'll give all the necessary information, ask the right questions, but then I'll assure the instructor that the payroll specialist can handle their question, and I'll be there if they have any other concerns. This helps to reinforce what instructional design does, which is design courses, and what we don't do, things like payroll management, enrollments, and IT tasks. We also need to make sure that we're documenting and following up on any meetings, questions, or interactions where work is assigned or there are responsibilities. So, for example, with every meeting, we have an agenda and someone takes notes. After a consultation, we'll follow up to summarize what was completed in the session, who's responsible for doing what in the future, any timelines or deadlines, and when we'll have our next check-in. Our team also has kickoffs with larger groups at the start of any project with regular check-ins, but from the very beginning, it's clear what instructional design does, what we don't do, and what the instructor is responsible for completing. And it's always helpful to send reminders, even if you don't think they're needed, because we're all dealing with so many things on our plate that we need to be able to keep what's urgent and important front of mind. Finally, speaking of urgent and important, it's very critical that you understand other people's priorities, what's urgent and important to them. And I learned a big lesson about this over the course of the pandemic. While I was managing a bunch of very important projects that I felt were urgent, some of our faculty had other priorities, things that were due right away, things that they had to manage at home that required their presence. So while we want to be understanding, it's also important to communicate why we have certain deadlines, why we're doing things a certain way, and how we need to best pivot when priorities change. I'd like to share a few tips now about increasing engagement and collaboration. The first is one that's super important to me, and that's presuming positive intentions. Now, do people always have the best of intentions? Maybe not, but it does change how we treat other people and think about them, even at a subconscious level. If you're having a hard time with this, I recommend finding something you value about the person or reframing the behavior that really gets under your skin. So, for example, if someone's hypercritical, you can focus on the fact they want to do better, that they can identify issues and problems that can then be solved. And remember, everyone's at a university or college for a reason. And typically, it's because they care, it's because they want to be there. The next tip is reconsidering how and why we meet. So I'm in Zoom almost 8 hours a day, and I can tell you all, Zoom fatigue is real. However, it's also leveled the playing field. I've had more participation across my team since we started using Zoom, and teammates at a distance who maybe didn't have an equal opportunity to speak up or to have their presence felt now have an equal square on the screen. But we need to make sure that we're valuing people's time and effort and making the purpose of every meeting very clear. So when we're getting together, there needs to be an agenda. People need documentation and links and information in order to prepare for the meeting. And then we need to know the purpose. Why are we getting together? Is it to delegate responsibilities, make decisions, do a work session, present information? If we have that information ahead of time, it makes it so much easier to approach the meeting with a sense of intention, with a sense of purpose. When people feel like their time is being valued, that definitely increases the mutual respect and admiration you have for one another, which in turn will increase collaboration and engagement. Another tip to increase engagement and collaboration is to use the clear feedback model. C stands for contextual, picking the right time and place to give feedback. L is for listening, practicing active listening strategies, and again, presuming positive intentions. E is delivering feedback with the aim to empower. So identifying areas for improvement or recognizing areas and strengths that are constructive, that make people feel capable, confident, ready to move forward. So you need to make sure people know they can do it and that they have your support. A is for accredited or using evidence when you're giving feedback. And I know we all know this as instructional designers, but we're evaluating products, not people. So instead of saying somebody is bad at a certain thing because that's part of their personality, look at evidence of their performance and where they can make improvements. For example, if someone has a lot of grammatical errors throughout their course, instead of saying they need to work on their grammar, give them some tools, give them some resources. Emphasize that we need to model academic writing for students. Again, depersonalize it a little bit and focus on what can be done. And then R, deliver feedback that resonates. Not everyone receives feedback in the same way. And if you understand what people's goals and values are, you can make sure what you're telling them aligns with those values. And then finally, it is important to make room on someone's plate before you add something in. When we first started doing in-depth quality assurance reviews, faculty were so overwhelmed and didn't know how to prioritize our feedback because we were giving them so much of it. We needed to be a little more selective and then identify what things our team could help them with and what we needed them to take responsibility for. Again, this comes back to the RACI model. Is everything really the responsibility of the instructor, the instructional designer, the program manager? You need to identify which things you can take off someone's plate before you assign them more work. This final set of lessons learned revolve around seeing and serving each individual. And to see someone, to serve them, you first need to understand who they are and what they care about. So that means understanding your audience of one. We do this by using surveys, small group discussions, or even checking an instructor's website to see what they work on. Once we have that information, we can then provide the service and support that's tailored to that individual. We can prepare for that first consultation, knowing that we'll make the most of the time together and really feeling like that time was worthwhile. Then we need to connect and lead with passion. So this means understanding not only the faculty's vision of their course and why they're teaching, but what really inspires and drives them in their field. For example, I spoke with a stats instructor who was really passionate about sports. And as a kid, having baseball cards and learning statistics kind of went hand in hand. He's still really passionate about sports and is able to convey that passion to his students. And then once we understand that passion, we can really build a course around it, activating what students care about, what difference they want to make in the world around them. And within reason and what's appropriate, I think highlighting the unique personality of the faculty member is a great way to humanize or personalize the online learning experience. Because we do have a lot of templates and resources we provide to instructors, unfortunately, a few of the folks we worked with early on thought they needed to water down their personality for online instruction. They needed to conform to the template. to be most effective and to meet our expectations. And what we really needed to clarify was no, you're here for a reason, your perspective matters, and you need to bring that forward through your videos, your activities, your assignments, and how you engage with students online. Next, I've learned that putting theory into action as early as possible helps those individuals that we work with thrive. In grad school, I spent a whole semester learning how to teach as a graduate teaching associate. We read Freire, Piaget, we discussed the differences between pedagogy and andragogy, and we delved into learning outcomes at the department and program level. But we didn't roll up our sleeves and actually apply what we were learning to our work. We had to figure out on our own how to put these theories and guidelines into practice. And we struggled to design assignments that would realize the vision that our department leadership had created. And here at Global Campus, our courses are short, 6 to 8 weeks, and adult learners need to get their hands on to the work as soon as possible in order to walk away with something tangible and valuable. So we emphasize putting that theory together with practice or layering it into instruction. We also emphasize student voice and choice, and I would argue we also do this with the faculty we work with. For a non-writing course, could students make a video essay or create some other way of showing that they learned the concept? Similarly, faculty have a number of methods for presenting information to students or designing activities, and that's part of the fun. Finally, we emphasize that students need to connect with each other and what they care about. So this gives immediate relevancy to whatever is being learned and also focuses on creating impact. And finally, we need to maintain relationships, and this was so critical during the pandemic, but it's something we need to take forward with us in instructional design. It's super easy to get focused on the next project, especially when you have a lot of work to accomplish in a given year. But touching base with instructors you've worked with in the past, sending a quick follow-up email, or even just scheduling a virtual coffee can really help convey that your virtual door is always open, and that's where some of the more interesting developments can happen. And those conversations would never happen if I hadn't maintained that connection. As instructional designers, we work with adult learners, but they aren't just students. They're our peers, our colleagues, the experts we work with, and the instructors we support. But we're also learners. We need to come out of this pandemic with a clear sense of how to move forward and not repeat the mistakes of the past. We need to be able to take something positive from a really stressful and trying situation. So what will I take with me moving forward? Again, I will see and serve individuals by recognizing their passion and empowering them to take knowledge into practice in order to impact lives and communities. I'll empower voice and choice in terms of course design. I'll center universal design that includes efforts to promote justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. And I'll move from theory to practice quickly. I'll make sure to clarify roles and responsibilities, to consistently document and follow up, especially when agreeing to changes or divvying up work, and knowing how other people's priorities impact their sense of urgency and importance. I'll increase stakeholder engagement and collaboration by selecting the right methods and modalities for engaging with others, for taking something off someone's plate before adding something on there, to build check-ins and communications into the ID workflow, and to understand my audience and communicate to them in ways they understand and care about. And finally, to keep building and sustaining collegial networks that can help connect people around what they care about, share best practices, highlight our success, and to be more inclusive. The biggest takeaway that will stick with me after this pandemic, and hopefully that after is coming soon, is that we're all learning. Everyone deserves grace. Everyone deserves goodwill. So thanks everyone for sticking around and for listening. Yeah, I'd be interested in hearing your questions or thoughts, and I may have a few questions for you. And I believe if you want to share your video and microphone, you can do that by requesting to share in the upper right right-hand corner of the screen. All right, so I'll go ahead and pose a question to the audience. What resonated with you or mirrored practices that you're incorporating either as an ID or as a faculty member at your college, university, in your workplace? Hi.
Hi, I don't know if I did this right. I didn't expect my whole face to pop up.
You
Thank you
did.
so much for that. It was
Yeah,
it was really interesting, and I loved hearing these strategies in the context of instructional design. But what I didn't get a sense of is, and maybe maybe what I'm looking for just isn't here. How do we take corrective action in a space where we've tried assuming that everyone has positive or good intentions, we've tried to be clear about sort of who's responsible for what, that not all of our designers can do everything, and that
yeah,
there are zones of authority and responsibility. And yet maybe there are still some challenges with people meeting expectations.
yeah.
How do we bring all of that into sort of the corrective action realm?
Yeah, that's a great question, and certainly something we experience every term. In fact, I'm experiencing that right now with some instructors we're working with. You know, even when people have the best of intentions, like over the winter break, we just had a ton of people kind of check off the face of the planet, and then getting them back on was hard because we started classes in early January. So I mentioned documenting everything and having follow ups. So that really helps when we have to engage leadership, maybe a dean or a chair, and we've learned that the hard way, right? So maybe we didn't follow up and have everything in writing. Maybe somebody verbally agreed to something. Oh, yeah, I'm going to get you those videos by Thursday. And then it doesn't happen. And then we have other projects. So the documentation is really important. And then tapping those people that you've connected to, your collaborators. So we have really good relationships with our chairs and department heads. So, if we haven't heard from somebody in a while, we'll usually reach out to them and say, hey, so and so said they were going to get all their videos done. They didn't. That was last Friday. Can you reach out to them? And more often than not, we get a response pretty quickly. And again, it's not like we're trying to tell on anybody or tattle. It's more out of, hey, I'm kind of concerned. I know this isn't, again, presuming positive intentions. I know you didn't mean to miss that deadline. Did something come up? Can I support you? And oftentimes it's just they have other priorities on their plate, like grants that they're writing. So it's like, okay, can I format those slides for you? Can I make them more accessible? We try to figure out what that roadblock is, but in the corrective path, having that documentation is super important, especially what they agree to. Having that, you're responsible for this. I'm going to do this. I did my part. You need to do your part. Yeah. Gloria has the question, do you require faculty to go over their courses or is it voluntary? I'm part of a new instructional design team and not many faculty have asked for help with their courses, but we can see their courses in Canvas and know that their courses can be improved. How do you get this partnership started? Um, we are in a very fortunate position at Global Campus where even before I came on board, the instructional design team was kind of paired up through the program leadership. So we have program managers, program directors within Global Campus, which is kind of like the extended studies unit. And when a course is programmed or a new instructor comes on board, a warm introduction is made to the instructional design team. They kind of hype us up a little bit and say, you're going to love this. You're going to get so much support. We might even have some other instructors kind of talk to them and say, this is what helped me, give them a little more mentorship and advice, but they normally drop our name at that point. And then from that warm handoff, we'll say, hey, do you have time to meet? We'd love to check in with you. Now, we do have instructors who do want to do it on their own. And I think I mentioned at the end having high expectations, high support. So we do require that instructors, at least on the credit side, meet a quality assurance standard that's set by the Cal State universities. Um, they need to get a certain score on this quality rubric. And if they work with us and we give them some templates and resources, there's a very good chance they're going to breeze right through that. But yeah, I hear you, Gloria. Getting those relationships started, usually you have to lean on somebody with authority or an existing connection within your university. So it might be meeting those department chairs, showing them what instructional design is, because a lot of them don't know, and maybe even showing them some example courses so they can see not necessarily what's wrong with their course, but the potential that they could reach working with you.
Hi, how are you, Lindsay?
I'm great. Thanks for joining us.
Good. I'm actually an instructional technologist at Rutgers. I'm part of the team that's putting this on today. Um,
Awesome.
how would you define the role of not help desk, but not design, but someone like me in between? How would you see what I can do, or maybe the relationship that you could build with a technologist for the
Yeah.
so let me kind of preface this with kind of what I do. A faculty member comes in, they work with the designer. The designer determines that it's more of a technological need. They come to me, then I build them up and go back to design. So, what role do you think a technologist could play, or like a junior and instructional designer could play in this role?
Yeah. Great question. And I would love this role as an ID. And I used to manage the instructional technology help desk. So that again, help desk kind of gives people the idea of technical support. So one, you've got to define, what you do and you can bring to the table. But I think getting into the instructional design process earlier will help. So when they do that initial consultation, if there's any way that you can even come in for the last 20 minutes, get a
Mhm.
sense of the design approach, and then you can make some, I think, more targeted recommendations. So it's more of a partnership when you're working with the instructional designer. Because again, I think the perception of technical support is really a difficult one to break,
It is.
right? Because you can help them with a lot of technical things, but what you're trying to do is push their thinking in terms of problem solving further.
Yeah, and
So,
to kind of
yeah,
compound what you're saying, my role is not IT. I don't fix
yeah,
printers, I don't fix computers, I don't do any networking. My
yeah,
role is strictly helping IDs identify the gaps in content and then
yeah,
creating those gaps for them and then referring them back to the designer with the assistance that I can able to give them. Does that make sense to you?
yeah. Oh, yeah, of course. Um, yeah, I would say being part of those consultations more often than not. And then again, kind of educating your partners on what you do and what you don't do. We're in the same boat. I
Yeah.
had someone ask me, "Can you fix my, camera?" And it's like, I actually can't.
No.
So
Nice.
so letting them know, but I think the most successful partnerships I've had with instructional technologists have been sitting around a table together or getting on Zoom together and being a little more collaborative. So having the designer throw it over to the instructional technologist and say, is this the best approach? Or is there a tool that we could use that would better address this learning outcome? So I guess kind of making it more um, based on defining the different instructional problems or the different instructional goals and seeing where you can work together. It is harder when you kind of throw it over the fence and then throw it back over,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. Great question. Well, I guess I am also kind of curious in terms of practices or things that you're doing to support more people-centered instructional design. What are some things that have been successful for you either during the pandemic or now that we're kind of, I don't want to say over the pandemic, but we're moving to a new phase in our universities and colleges. All right. and we might not have any. That's okay. Um, well, I definitely want to keep the conversation going. And so I'm going to go ahead and put my information, my email address in the chat. I'd love to talk to people about, the challenges you're facing or some of the strategies that you found to be successful. Um, oh, newsletter. Here we go. To reach faculty. Yes, that's something we are working on. We don't have one yet. Um, Maureen says, I find that a lot of faculty don't really understand the kind of help your field can give. I've learned over the years that the ID staff are very creative and can help faculty understand how students may be experiencing the courses. Definitely. And I think that's where building your allies, um, you know, faculty that you've worked with, having them talk to other people, give tours of their courses, testimonials. And when we have these kickoff meetings, I mentioned in the presentation, we'll bring returning instructors who can kind of guide and mentor, and maybe even talk about their classes in the kickoff meeting, as well as explaining like what instructional design is, how we're going to work together, and that helps. Training the technologists on QM and outcomes can help too. Definitely, Kevin. We have our instructional technologists focus on certain sections of our quality assurance tool as well, specifically around accessibility, selecting the right tools and resources to engage the student, and then using the LMS in the most effective way. Those are three of the categories on our, we use Canvas, but we were on Blackboard for a very long time. We made the Canvas transition during the pandemic, fall 2020. And me too, I love Canvas as well. I came from a Canvas campus before joining Global Campus, and it was rough for me to go back to Blackboard. I hadn't used it since 2012, I think. So it was really nice to use that tool again. But yeah, that was a huge lift. And we ended up migrating most of the content for our instructors just because it was easier than helping folks clean up after the fact. So the more we can do on the front end and make our future selves happy, the better. What qualities do you want from an ID? Um, okay, this is a good question. So when I'm hiring instructional designers, I don't necessarily need someone that knows everything, but someone who loves to learn and has a deep passion and curiosity for learning. So if they love to solve problems, if they, obviously have a background in instructional design and learning theory, that's great. But yeah, everyone who is on our team who loves to learn. Thank you, Maureen. I appreciate that. Kevin, do you have another part to that thought? I like the dot dot dot.
Sorry about that. I feel like I'm dominating. I'm in school
Okay.
for instructional design, and one of the things we're watching is like the concept of yet, YET.
Yes.
And the idea behind that is you can be the greatest designer or technologist or help desk, whatever you want. But if you don't have the yet mentality of switching from a open mindset to a closed mindset, like if you're closed off, you just will not be successful in this field.
Yeah.
You just won't. And there's evidence to support that as designers and team members, if we were kind of coming in and saying like I know everything, I know pedagogy, I know andragogy, I know all those things, right? But you're not in that yet, like I don't know this yet sort of thing. By adding the dot 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 yet, you're opening yourself to open learning, which is really
Yeah.
important in every position in education because unless you're like really 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 high up the food chain, and even then you need yet. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. It's funny you mentioned that on our quality assurance rubric, instead of saying not met, we'll say not yet met.
Yeah.
And just that little change has made a difference in how we have that debrief.
Yeah, and I don't want to jump in too much, but just that was important to me. And
Yeah,
I couldn't type all
absolutely.
that out in the chat window. So
No, thank
I'm
you
gonna
for
go now. Okay, thank
thank
you.
you for jumping on. So Rains, let's see. Yeah, the and or yes. Yeah, for folks that do improv that or theater, that and yes is pretty familiar. Lori, are you open for additional virtual video conversation following the conference? Absolutely. Maybe an extension of the virtual roundtable. I can reach out to you. Please do, Lori. Yeah, we have that virtual roundtable on our team every Friday, and we have special guests come in. So we've had the ADA team come in, student services, people from different campuses. So if you really want to meet the whole team, I'd be glad to have folks come on to that too. And if people want a copy of the slides or any of the other materials, just reach out to me and I'd be happy to share. In fact, let me see if you came in late, I'll drop in the Google Drive link again. And like I said, feel free to reach out to me. I'm always happy to collaborate, continue the conversation. Um, and if you have any resources for me, I would love to. Yeah, Kevin, you can definitely, I can send you a video if you need it too. All right. Thanks, everyone.